Hey everybody, welcome to the Anthony and Todd Show. We are a weekly podcast that critiques and memes music. I'm your host Trevor, aka Dua Lipa into a swimming pool, and I know we did this Duke Deuce review a month ago, so this is late, but Monk ain't dead, Monk ain't dead, Monk ain't dead. And I'm joined by my ever-attentive co-host, my best friend, my pal, my amigo, my droog, Vincent.
AKA, I have an Tyler the Creator Igor skin in Minecraft. I've upgraded from the Doom skin to the Igor skin. Progression in Minecraft. It's very good for the soul.
How do you know what his bottom half looks like?
It's just like the pink pants, right?
Oh, you're talking about like the like suit that he wears with the wig?
Oh, I thought you were talking about the bare ass naked Tyler the Creator.
I was. This is episode 139 of the Anthony and Todd Show, an episode we would like to call The Morning Matters LP2. This stuff writes itself. Today we've got some exciting releases for you. We're going to be going over the latest from Dua Lipa, Future Nostalgia, as well as the latest album from Knxwledge, 1988, as well as the latest EP from Yazmin Lacey, Morning Matters, and the collaborative album between Sufjan Stevens and Lowell Brams, Aporia.
And I know what some of you may be thinking. Is TNA's Bram have multiples, and is he collaborating with Sufjan Stevens? I have some very disappointing news. No.
Wow.
That's a very
That's
obscure
the burning
reference.
question that's on everybody's mind.
Is Bram from TNA still relevant? No. You can find us social media at Anthony and Todd on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You can find us at youtube.com/The Anthony and Todd Show. And you can find us at Podbean, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Play Podcasts, and Spotify by searching The Anthony and Todd Show in your favorite podcast browser. Now, with any further ado, it's time for us to do a leap into some future nostalgia.
The latest by Dua Lipa. Here's the latest album from Dua Lipa, Nostalgia Ultra. Future Nostalgia. Dua Lipa is an English singer, songwriter, and model who burst onto the scene back in 2017 with her self-titled debut album. It had like 8 singles, and the only one that really mattered was New Rules, which was the first #1 single in the UK. That was her first #1 single. Unfortunately,
that was the first #1 single ever in the UK.
Is the first song to ever chart. So far, no other United Kingdom artist could make it into the chart, so it was just empty.
Not even the Beatles.
It was just empty until Dua Lipa came around. Also, it was her like 5th or 6th. It was her 6th single off of this entire project, and it finally charted. And then she released 2 more after that. But yeah, she's definitely out here making a lot of pop music. She's been relevant for a couple
She's
of
out
years.
here, you know. She's out here roaming.
She's just
making music.
Doing it.
just living, having fun.
But you know, instead of just becoming a pop darling, she decided to go ahead and make Future Nostalgia more inspired by electropop, dance pop, new disco, new metal. Scratch that last one. She even cites artists as her influence, such as Gwen Stefani, Madonna, Blondie, and Outkast, which are definitely, there are shades of all of them all across this record. And of course, this is carried by the singles "Don't Start Now," which gets a ton of radio play even now, as well as "Physical" and "Break My Heart." This album is 11 songs, 37 minutes.
I didn't listen to her last album, but I did hear New Rules like all the time because it's like one of those pop charts that is just constantly in the zeitgeist. I was excited to see where this project would lead because I thought Don't Start Now was just this really fun mix of like electropop and disco, and it was really incredible. It had this fucking brilliant bass line that was so catchy, so hypnotic. And I was just wanting to know if this was going to be like some type of sophomore progression for her to a new territory. And it actually turns out it is. It's like all these singles kind of follow not all these singles, all these songs kind of follow the same route into going into various areas of electronica, whether it's like new disco or electropop or synth pop. Just so many different styles of electronica are on here that are really fun, hypnotic, and just super catchy. I just find the production she's over is super bouncy and fun, and I find her charisma on this to be like unstoppable a lot of times. I just I think one of the things like I can diss this album on is I think the lyricism doesn't take away from the album itself, and it isn't like terrible by any means, but I just don't sense a lot of personality in it. And I think it has some like overall theme with this idea of future nostalgia, this idea of like constantly falling into the same romance over and over again and expecting like kind of like a different outcome. And I think that's what a lot of this album is just like having an expectation of love and just keeping on falling back into it, even though there's like no hope for it. I think that's like kind of an interesting concept, but it's like one that's not really cemented. It's just more all the songs have kind of like this common ground that pulls them all together.
I would agree with that, and I almost would argue that the lyrics are not super important here. And I understand like this. I understand kind of the storyline and like the influences, but again, like based on the influences, I think like Madonna and Gwen Stefani like and Blondie wrote just like these really fun like synth pop ballads that got tons of radio play, and like they weren't necessarily like about anything. I'm thinking like Madonna's Holiday, like a huge song, but it like doesn't really have any sort of lyrical substance, and it's just catchy as hell. I think that Dua Lipa is like following more in those footsteps, which I actually really enjoy.
Yeah, I think she definitely on this album finds a ton of charisma and ton of personality to project herself. I just think, I don't know, I wanted her to take a little bit more risk on here lyrically. And the only track she really does is the last track, Boys Will Be Boys. And it's kind of the worst track on here because it sonically has a different palette with the strings and the piano that's supposed to feel like this grand epic ballad, but it just comes off as like very like self-important. Like it doesn't work.
Yeah, it's
and like while she has some like nuance, like the song's all about like sexism and like boys will be boys, but like girls can't be girls, that type of idea. There's some fun lyricism on here with I'm sure if there's something that I can't find the words to say, I know that there will be a man around to save the day, and that was sarcasm in case you needed a mansplain. Like that's really funny and clever, but like the track doesn't have enough of that to break past like the very uninteresting production, and it just comes off as just this grand ballad that really just doesn't build up to any of the more epic moments on the rest of the album.
Yeah, it feels kind of tacked on, like there's this really fun and like neon bouncy kind of album, and then at the very end she was like, hey, how about a chamber pop ballad? And then that's the end of the album, so you're left thinking about that instead of everything else that was talked about on this whole project. But
that's like the weakest moment on here. Like everything else is pretty consistent for what it is. Like the opening, Future Nostalgia, reminds Trevor wrote, it reminds him of Janelle Monáe's Dirty Computer in some regards. I love the lovely synthetic bass and the cheap brassy synths that escalate into a grand piano. Like all these flourishes combined together are just beautiful and so vigorously mixed together. Cool is just this like a very awesome synth pop track with very like Carly Rae Jepsen like performance on top of it. Like she comes off as very like cutesy and like girl next door type persona. Levitating has this like huge wall of production with like the constant hint of a synth patch in the background. Like as the production kind of constantly fades throughout, you always have that one constant synth patch being hit. It actually brings everything together in a really, really nice way. Hallucinate has this very lovely electropop production with like Dua Lipa so effortlessly just figuring like having her own personality shine on top of it, and it has like house-like production on it. Love Again samples Your Woman by Whitetown. the strings, the violin from that song, I can't remember, but in here it's like
a bugle. I think
it's
like very like military camp-esque.
I don't know. I kind of maybe could have gone without the sample because it's so well known. It kind of seems like a bit shoehorn thrown in, but I like it nonetheless.
I think the only thing that would have made this worse is the Fort Minor sample.
Break My Heart kind of cements the idea of like kind of what this album's about, is that I'm falling in love with the one that could break my heart, and kind of falling in love and back in love again and having nostalgia for that type of romance. And then Good in Bed is also of the same note, where she says, it's also super catchy. I know it's really bad, messing with my head. I know we're always mad. That's what makes us good in bed. Like, also she says fuck on the track, and then she giggles like she said a bad word, which I really enjoyed because that's the only expletive word on here. There's no other bad words on here.
I did like it. It was.
I just found that to be really funny.
Uncomfortable.
I just found it to be weird that it was like emphasized in this one moment, like she was doing like the most edgy thing imaginable, and she just says fuck. I don't know, I really enjoyed it. It made it have some weight, which is nice when, like, I don't know, curse words mean something, I guess. I don't know. But at least it brought like a unique one-off moment that I can actually, it's kind of like ironically funny, but it showcases her humor in a sense, which I enjoy. But yeah, like I really love this album. I think it was just very well packaged, put together. Only one track I really don't care for. Everything else just seems super polished. Dua Lipa seems so effortlessly standoffish on top of these beats. Like, she is truly unstoppable, unmovable in her warpath of making terrific pop music. And I think this is just this absolutely lovely blend of electronica and pop.
Yeah, I actually really like this. I feel like there are a lot of pop musicians now that are kind of going against the grain, which I enjoy. And I think that kind of not necessarily started with Carly Rae Jepsen, but I think that she was probably the last one to do something like that. And Dua Lipa, I think, is following along in her footsteps very, very well, because I think that not necessarily like when artists start to break away from the mainstream like that, then they get better necessarily.
Yeah.
But like, I definitely think that this allows for more creative freedom, and maybe not as many of these songs are as radio friendly, but they are definitely a lot of fun, and I think that they are more well worth my time than things that are played on the radio. Another good example, Charlie XCX.
I think Charlie XCX is different. That's more like avant pop. And I would also say like Caroline Polachek's like art pop. And I think those are like different. I think the Carly Rae Jepsen reference was like the most poignant.
I think, well, I guess I think so. I wouldn't even put Caroline Polachek in that same like bin, I guess. But I'm thinking like Charlie XCX definitely had big radio hits and then went and made like a really avant-garde pop album. Like, literally, I was thinking about this the other day. I was listening to Charlie. I was listening to bits of Charlie. And then after it was done, you know how it plays, like, the radio based on the artist on Spotify?
Yeah.
It played Boom Clap. And I was like, this is not the same artist. But it is. That's such a weird, like, realization.
I think, like, New Rules from her last album, it's, like... It's Dua, but on this it's like turn up to 10.
Yeah, she played into that for a little while. Like Carly Rae Jepsen made "Call Me Maybe" and that kind of thing. But now, like, she's really carving her own path, and I've enjoyed this new Dua that we're seeing.
Yeah. I like how we just emphasize like the first half and the last half of her name. But yeah, keep my eye on scores a few minutes right now. I think this is like an 8. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I would give it an 8 as well. This was good time.
Yeah.
Good time.
This is an essential project.
Yeah.
Essential pop project. Do you have the knowledge, Trevor?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, time to go over the latest Knxwledge album, 1988.
Nice.
What happened in 1988, Trevor?
I don't think that we ever found out, honestly. I think Knxwledge was born. Do a fact check.
That was it.
Fact check that real quick. Time to get into the latest Knxwledge album, 1988. Knxwledge is an American producer based out of L.A., and since 2009, he's had 95 releases on Bandcamp, the majority of which I can't even pronounce. Back in 2015, though, he released HUD Dreams on Stone's Throw, his debut album on Stone's Throw, and the next year went on to produce Mama on Kendrick's To Pimp a Butterfly, which was, I think, a really groundbreaking moment for him in his career. Not Kendrick necessarily, but, well, it was for Kendrick, but for Knxwledge to break through to that kind of mainstream success, I think it was awesome. And he also teamed up with Anderson .Paak for the No Worries duo with Yes Lord back in 2016.
And the collaboration's also on here on a track too.
Yeah, which is a lot of fun. But Knxwledge, I think, is kind of one of these unsung producer heroes, like in the hip hop realm. He's worked with artists like Blue, Joey Badass, Quelle Chris, Kendrick, obviously, Homeboy Sandman, Earl Sweatshirt, the elusive Makami, Alchemist, Action Bronson, Rock Marciano, Westside Gun. Like, his list of credentials is huge, and that's not even everybody that was on there that he's worked with. But now, finally, 1988 is his second album on Stone's Throw Records.
Yeah, I really like this. Like, I think this is good. But for me, because, like, I like this area. It's kind of like pseudo plunderphonics, but it's not really. It's more just sampled, like heavily sampled hip hop. But I really like this structure of an album where it's very loose, flows well together. But I think the thing that Knxwledge does is he's just like, he's too loose on here. And it's not sloppy. Like, his fundamentals are crazy insane. Like, this thing is super just like well polished and like easy going, just like everything just flows into each other just so effortlessly. But like, the thing that like I found to be the biggest disappointment about this was not like the material itself, but it's the fact that it didn't really amount to anything much more than like his average beat tape or anything like that.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. There's one thing about this album that kind of bothers me, and it's the fact that it's split into so many smaller tracks. I think having 22 tracks on here, the album is under 40 minutes. I don't think there's really any reason to make this 22 tracks. Like, I think it easily could have been like 10. And I think the beauty of artists that I like that kind of fall into the same realm, I'm thinking specifically like Avalanches on Since I Left You and J Dilla, two producers or groups of producers that I think are huge. One thing I really like about their bodies of work is that a track doesn't necessarily have to stay with the same sample the whole time.
Yeah.
And things change up throughout the entire track. Now, like, the Avalanches do that very easily because, like, they switch up their samples, they switch up the records that they pull from to create new tracks, and J Dilla does the same. Like, his production grows and changes over time. Now, it's not to say that Knxwledge's doesn't, because this album does evolve over the course of the album. But as soon as, like, one single sample is done, or he's squeezed everything that he feels like he can out of the sample, it's the next track, even though the music is still flowing over into the next one.
Yeah. I like, that's very sentimental of, like, what this project is just, like, or fundamental, not sentimental. It's very, like, it flows well. Like, the segments in between, like,
oh yeah, I don't
everything,
think it doesn't flow well at all.
It's like, yeah, no, I was just explaining more that it does flow extremely well, but it's just like there isn't much outside of that. There's too many tracks. Like, it expands. Like, these ideas can expand. Like, they're not completely worthless ideas by any means, or we're not getting like 20 seconds of a track and then we're cutting to something else completely different. Like, we're getting full enough in like these 1 minute like track periods, like, but like they could be more. Like, I think I want some more expansive ideas in here for like this type of material.
Yeah,
because it's just like, if you're gonna promote this as like an album, I expect more. I guess more intention. Like, this feels fine. Like, the production on this is great. Like, he is truly a masterclass artist, similar up to getting up there in level with someone like Madlib, and that's like a huge like legendary figure of hip hop, and he's right there with like the amount of fundamentals he has. And I just find like on this, like he just doesn't, it doesn't progress to a situation of importance. Not really, the tracks don't progress, because they do, but it's just like they don't have a grander sense of importance throughout.
Yeah, that makes, I think that makes sense. I just like wish, I think a lot of this would almost be like alleviated if he just combined multiple tracks into one. And I think that would feel like the tracks evolve more instead of feeling like they don't expand to like what they could be. Because like right now, here's what I'm getting from this. There are 2 tracks where people sing, right?
Yeah.
Take those out of the equation. The other 2 tracks are just beats or like vocal samples, like of just people yelling and like grilling Alchemist or not grilling Alchemist, grilling like Knxwledge, or talking about like, yeah, I'll listen to Knxwledge, but I just prefer trap music.
Trap music.
Yeah, like it's literally just like conversations being had instead of like actual singing. So like I enjoy those, but like the moments don't feel like they evolve much out of that.
Yeah. I don't know. I like the idea of combining tracks because I think it alleviates sense that there's more to this album than just a bunch of loose ideas.
Yeah.
Even though they do flow well together.
Right.
I also, in the sense of ambition, like we got Slaus and Malone last year, and that was something similarly loose and formed to this, but it had a grander sense of purpose. And like even like comparing it to the almighty J Dilla, like that had a grander sense of purpose to it. Like Donuts had a grander sense of purpose. This like it's fundamentally sound. I can't emphasize that enough. The production on here is excellent, but it fundamentally just doesn't progress to anything higher than itself.
Right. And I think that Knxwledge was obviously like going for something on here. Like we didn't even touch upon like the track titles come into like this poem that you can read all in like one cohesive poem. And I definitely think like Knxwledge had an idea of where he wanted to go. I just don't think that it necessarily translated well across the medium.
I don't think there's like even that, like I don't think listening to this, I don't think there's like really a narrative or a thematic presence or anything. You can only
like
there's
get
a poem
that idea from the poem. Like it doesn't come across in the music at all.
Yeah. But like again, I like this. I think this is a fun project. I think Knxwledge, true to form, stays to himself. Like he doesn't mess up royally or do anything completely like dumb on here. I think
it's all pleasant to listen to.
Yeah, I just think it just doesn't challenge itself, and that's kind of like the biggest disappointing factor is that like he feels too chill and too relaxed on here. And it's like, I don't know, I feel like at this stage in his career, like when he's if he puts out an album instead of like a beat tape or something, I would like for him to showcase more diversity in his catalog and progress more.
I understand.
But that's about it. Keep my eye on scores if you tell me this right now. I think this is a 7-. I enjoyed it nonetheless.
I'd say, I would give this a 7-. I enjoyed it, but I'm not 100% sure that it amounts to a whole lot outside of this.
Are you ready to Yazmin Lacey up your shoes?
Wow, that was the transition we've been waiting for.
Time to go over the latest Yazmin Lacey album, Morning Matters, not Mathers.
Yazmin Lacey is an English singer songwriter, especially in the soul and jazz field. Her backing band is called the Running Circle, and she is most well known for creating these couple of EPs that we have taken a look at on the show. We first got into her with her 2018 EP, but before that she released an EP called Black Moon back in 2017, and then
Black Moon Rising.
Yeah, by Creedence Clearwater. Then, of course, following that up with When the Sun Dips 90 Degrees, which had some really great tracks on there, like 90 Degrees, Something in My Heart, Trust. And then this year, finally released Morning Matters, which is the third EP in a trilogy. And she says, she has this quote on Bandcamp, and I quote, "Black Moon was trauma, when the sun dips 90 degrees was healing, and Morning Matters is moving forward." End quote. So I definitely, she said that she had this idea in her head from the beginning of Black Moon. As soon as she made that first EP, she wanted there to be 3 of them. So I appreciate that she followed up on that idea.
Yeah. This is more or less just a little bit of progression past her last EP. So it covers similar territory. It's more optimistic, and it feels more like a fresh beginning for her in a ton of these scenarios on these tracks. But more or less it has the same sound palette of her last EP, has similar performances to her last EP. She still comes off as super smooth over this lovely smooth production. It's this double smooth, or how do we call it? We called it double creamy last time.
I don't remember.
Too thick. I remember related it to have like a double peanut butter and jelly or double peanut butter sandwich. Oh. It's just something that shouldn't work, but it does. Like it really, she is truly the same characteristics of her production, and it works out really well. And on this, I just find it to be just a new beginning for her, where it, in the sense she isn't challenging herself productionally or performance wise on here, but it's just more of to end off the trilogy, to have a fresh start story wise. And I really enjoyed this. I think this literally just starts off where her last EP ended. It just continues through and finishes out the arc overall, and it has some lovely moments the same way her last EP had lovely moments, and the two mesh well together. If you like put the 2 EPs together, they work really well. Mm-hmm. Like this almost like works well if you combine all 3 EPs and stuck them together.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I really like this like feeling of a fresh start, because like I think that idea does come across in like her lyricism, but also like, I don't know, the tone of the songs and like the energy that she is protruding in her voice. You don't just have to read about how it's a fresh start. Like you can hear that in the sound. You can feel that like in her energy. And I appreciate that, because like you can write what an album's about all day long, but if you don't portray that in your music, then I don't think it really means anything. And she definitely like embodies that feeling of a new fresh start. I like that a lot. And
like one thing I like is like the track Morning Matters, which is like, it's such a contrast to the last track that she had on her last EP, Burn and Rise, which is like waking up in the morning and just hurting. Just like you, like almost like one of those optimistic period, or not optimistic, but one of those periods where you're like you stayed up all night and now it's daytime and now you're trying to go to bed. It's just like super complicated, or at least that's what I attach that feeling to, is just like the sun coming up and it hurts. Yeah. Like you're not expecting it. It surprises you in a sense. And like now it's the opposite, where she's like really optimistic about the morning and she's really excited because it brings this era of fresh energy. And then like that also goes on from Morning Matters to Morning Sunrise, which it expands outside the world to everything in her world that does it, and not just her, and how it's optimistic for everyone around her. Mm-hmm. I like the last track, Not Today Mate, where she demands more respect for herself. She's feeling empowered. I like the track The Interlude, Lately, which I have a problem with, not because it's a bad track by any means, but I think interludes should be short, and this is like a full-fledged track.
Yeah, I think this is longer than some of the other tracks, and it's called Interlude.
But she's recovering and more or less saying she's sorry how she's been treating this particular person lately, and she loves him, but she's just been going through a rough patch, progressing forward. On Your Own, how she has to deal with everything on her own now, deal with everything by herself, progress forward as an individual. It's just this process of rebuilding, resetting up. It's just a very tight, everything blends together in this like 21 minutes. It thematically works together. It presently feels weather. It feels super warm, spring-like in nature. Just super creamy, dreamy, memey. No, I'm just kidding. But it works together in a very fine-tuned nature. I think in the grander scheme of things, next project, whatever she has, where she's out of this arc, I would like her to progress with a little bit something different.
I'm a little curious, I guess. Like, she is constantly going in this like very slow jam kind of direction. I would wonder what would happen if she kicked it up a notch and like did something a little more energetic.
200 beats per minute.
That's exactly what I want.
No, but I really enjoyed this. I just think this is fine. Like, this is awesome. But in the future, I want something that takes her EP material and moves it and just separates what's different from these EPs to whatever album or other EP trilogy she'll put out in the future.
Yeah.
Keep my scores if you telling me this right now. I feel a 7+ on this.
Yeah, I'm gonna give this a 7. I think.
Are you ready to low and hardy?
I keep thinking about. I'm pretty sure that the town that the Goonies takes place in is called Aporia.
Oh, I thought you were saying the town that the Goonies takes place in is Sufjan Stevens.
It is, yeah. Actually, Aporia, I'm pretty sure, is the guy who works at the Quickie Mart on The Simpsons.
I don't think that's true.
Aporia.
Time to go over the latest Sufjan Stevens and Lowell Brams album. As Trevor said, Aporia. It's a thematic ambient album based on The Simpsons. Now I want to make that album.
That would be pretty good. If you had Danny Elfman at the helm, I think it would be pretty good. Sufjan Stevens is an American indie folk electronic musician. He's been making music for a long time, but his biggest releases have to be Illinois back in 2005.
Come on, fellas, feel the Illinois.
Come on, boys, jump right into the Illinois.
Come on in.
It's got a lot of group vocals. I'm just kidding. It's got a lot of symphonic, like instrumental background. But where I first got into him was in 2015 with Carrie and Lowell. Remember that name? Where he got back to a lot of his like folk roots. It's a very like folksy album. I enjoyed a lot of the cuts off of there. Lowell Brams, hey, do you remember him? That's Sufjan Stevens' stepfather, who is referenced in Carrie and Lowell. That's the guy.
That's the guy.
This album, Aporia, it marks the retirement of Brams, who he helped Sufjan found his record label Asthmatic Kitty, and they're like business partners. This whole album, which I'm sure if you've listened to it is pretty obvious, it was recorded as a result of multiple jam sessions between the two.
Yeah, and it's just an ambient or like electronic album,
it
mostly
as new age music.
Yeah, new age is probably the best way.
I
like new age the best. I think that's the more descriptive because like it isn't fully ambient because it just gets into super symphonic loud territory at times.
Yeah.
But new age is the best. Actually, I describe it as Kanko and Gaku, Japanese ambient new age disco music from the 1980s and 1990s. So yeah, this is also, they collaborated before on Lowell Brams. He released an album like 2008, 2009. It's like Music for Insomnia. I haven't listened to it. I just know that this is not their first.
I think.
Music for airports plus insomnia, where you cannot sleep at the airport. But yeah, I was interested in listening to this just because the concept of like a new age ambient album from Sufjan Stevens interests me, but then I realized he also did the same thing back in like 2017 with Planetarium, and I remember I did not like that. I just completely forgot that project existed. I don't know if you remember. I don't know if you remember that.
I remember it because I liked Karen Lowell, and then I remember that he released Planetarium, and I was like, "What is this?"
So this is pretty much the same but worse. I don't like this. This is in areas of new age and like ambient that we've already been to before, and there isn't anything complimentary about the track list or the artist or essentially anything about this. It doesn't work as an album. It fundamentally just doesn't, because like a lot of these tracks just like they go on forever, like not in track length, but in just like the build up of production. They don't build up to anything interesting. They just linger in these bland, already explored areas of ambient and new age, like disinheritance, determined outcome, mythology, backhanded cloud, glorious you, the Lydian rain, especially the last track on here. Like these are just like spread out nothing ideas that last for like a minute or two, and then we'll move on to something else, and then those will either like begin or end with these spread out ideas, and then you'll maybe get like a moment of like a cool segment or something, or some like glitchy distortion, some really interesting bumping percussion, but it doesn't progress for long enough, so the ideas feel unfinished. Like the end of Afterworld Alliance has this like building up at the end, so you think it's going to go somewhere exciting, and it just fades out.
Yeah, I thought that the beginning of this sounded really promising. Yuja and then What It Takes, like it sounded like the beginning of a symphonic movement. I was really excited to see where this was going to go, and then immediately after that, it just nosedived. I was like, man, what happened?
I personally actually didn't care for Uja. I thought it was just a lame synth patch that played out, and then some unflattering synths came into frame, and I really just didn't like the combination of the two. What It Takes has some nice frantic drums that escalates into a cool moment with atmospheric buildup of a bunch of various synths, and then that escalates into just boring, long-played synths that is just like, you listen to Brian Eno once, and this is the outcome of it. Agathon is probably my favorite track on here, as an interesting chord selection in the middle that sounds like an epic video game score that is accompanied by this weird flute-like synth and this glitchy distortion. But other than that, the track doesn't go full length. It just stops.
Yeah.
It just breaks down into like emptiness again. Atraxia is a cool moment. It has this very cool like chime-like sense. It reminds me of the Minecraft soundtrack, very C418-esque. The runaround is a cooler epic sip moment, but it doesn't like it's like really cool synth work, but it really, in the grander scheme of things, it doesn't have any personality to it to make it interesting.
Yeah, I would agree.
And that's it. Like, that's this album. Like, I just don't think there really is any originality to it. It's just, like, already explored terrains of ambient music.
Yeah, I think it's, like... Honestly, this is, like, very strange to me because, like, maybe to Sufjan and Lowell, like, this means more. But, like, when I read that it was about, like, oh, it's about the, like, the retirement of his stepfather and blah, blah, blah. And I went and looked up, like, these words that I didn't know, like... so I could know how to like pronounce words like Yuja and eudaimonia and that
I think it's actually Ouija.
You're right. It's Ouija. It's Ouija board. That's Oasis actually.
Wonderwall.
Yeah. But
it's all about Wonderwall. It's like taking Wonderwall, stretching it out so it's an ambient track.
I think I would actually enjoy that. But I went and looked up a lot of these like words, and a lot of them are like philosophy terms in Greek that mean things like essence or prosperity and like feelings of freedom from stress or worry. But then like I don't think that the music reflects that at all.
Yeah,
it's very strange. Like, you could make like I don't know. You could make a song about like murder and then call it like Sunshine and Rainbows, and it just wouldn't line up. And then you could say like, look how deep I am. But this is like I don't know. This is stupid. This is like when I got mad over the titles of The Comet Is Coming.
I just feel like it's just like. The story behind this album probably means more to them than it means as an album
is not
in whole.
Translating at all. Like
it just like it like I read the Bandcamp description and like it was just like they've been friends for years. Like Lowell set up Sufjan's career by buying him his first keyboard and all that, and it's just like wow, this means like a lot to them, but to me it just means nothing. Like comparing this to like another recent ambient album we reviewed on the channel, me and Jonathan reviewed the latest Brian Eno. album that he did with what is his brother's name? I can't remember, but it's his collaboration with his brother, and is essentially true to form to what he's always done. He doesn't really challenge himself that much, but the piano melodies are so calming, and there's different types of textures and warmth to each track that it works, and the album complements each other as a whole. It's not super visionary in its quest. Like, this is already conquered territory for him, but in the concept of an album, it works. This album, one, isn't anything new, same thing like that Brian Eno album, but two, doesn't complement each other, because like these ideas are different enough to clash with each other, but they're not different enough to stand out.
Yeah.
Like, there isn't, like, they want to have like a bunch of different types of electronica on here, but it just ends up being just various shades of ambient that just don't mash up together.
I agree.
And that's all I really got to say. Keep in mind those scores if you tell me this right now. I'm feeling a 3 to 4 on this.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 3 because I'm not afraid.
I'm not afraid to take a stand. And that's it for this week's episode of the Anthony and Todd Show. Until next time, guys, you can find us at youtube.com/Anthony and Todd Show. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, at Anthony Todd. You can find us on Podbean, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Play Podcasts, and Spotify by searching the Anthony and Todd Show in your favorite podcast browser. Until next time, guys, I'm Vincent.
I'm Trevor.
And see you, boyos.
Bye, everybody.